presentation tonight is really about food and the fact that everybody has to go. And there's a lot that last year we did a lot of work and we raised a lot of money and we did a lot of good work putting clean water pumps into villages around the world through our efforts during Lent. And one of the things that also goes hand in hand with clean water is what do we do with not so clean water. And sanitation is just as important as access to clean water. And so we're just going to talk a little bit tonight about why that's the case and why we as a community of believers should be putting our funds towards funding bathrooms as much as we go towards funding clean water.
I tried.
So most of us think of this when we have to go. And when I say this, it just means a regular porcelain throne toilet, right? So, you know, I would hope that all of us have at least one of these in our houses. In my house. And at any one given point in time, most of us can go into any other person's house in this room, or mostly in this whole general region of Richmond, and find one of these, right? At least one. So this is, kind of essential. We all have to go, and usually this is what we think of when we think of having to go to the bathroom. But for millions of people around the world, this is actually what it looks like to go to the bathroom. So in the developing world, so in parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, and parts of South America, you're more often going to find this than what we saw before. And while this may look like an outhouse of yesteryear for some of you who may still have memories of what a traditional outhouse was like here, right? I'm sure there are people here who have used outhouses, if nothing else from camping and a few other things. These are actually a little bit different from even the outhouses that we're used to. I mean, I don't know about you, but the outhouse that I knew of as a kid or had seen had a seat in it, right? I mean, most of us had seats, right? But in these kinds of latrines, this is pretty much what you get. You get a hole and some footprints. So, and when you see this hole, sometimes it's not even that big. We have this lovely replica here that Judy Meyer put together, which is fantastic, I have to say. And you can go in and see what it's like to be in sometimes they're this size or maybe just a little bit bigger in terms of pit latrines. But essentially it's a hole in the ground with 2 footprints on the outside, and that's what you get. This is actually pretty generous with the grass covering. This one is actually grass behind here, because there are some, and my mom and Henry can attest to this, who came to visit me, there are some that have no covering. So bare butt out in the, middle of nowhere. So how do I actually know about this topic? Because I don't know if I want to be the resident expert on latrines. But in 2002, I was in the U.S. Peace Corps. Many of you sent me letters and lots of wonderful things, and it was actually on the advice of John Olson to go into the Peace Corps. And I'm really glad that I did. It was an awesome experience. But from 2002 to 2004, I used a pit latrine nearly every single day of my life, which is really, really, coming from the porcelain thrones of here. Even some of our worst bathrooms here have a lot on some of those awful pit latrines that I had to use. And again, Mom and Henry, I think, for the shock value alone, had to go through some horrible experiences that I wish I could take back. And in 2005, I became really active with a group called the Virginia Friends of Mali. There is no Virginia Friends of Guinea. There is a Friends of Guinea group, but not a Virginia Friends of Guinea. There was already an active group of the Virginia Friends of Mali, the country, not a person. And Guinea and Mali happened to be right next door to one another. So I joined their group. I was able to speak French and hang out, and it was great. And one of the things that we've been doing as the Virginia Friends of Mali was doing a lot of cultural, business, music exchanges. We've had a lot of Malian artists. We brought them to the Richmond Folk Festival, most notably in the most recent history, Basi Kukuyate, who came maybe 2 years ago to the music festival. And we also created a sister city relationship between Richmond, Virginia, and Ségou, Mali. That was sort of our crowning achievement as a group of like 5 of us. And then in 2011, myself and other people who are on the board of the Virginia Friends of Mali, we actually were able to get a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant for our sister city relationship with Ségou. And as part of that project, we basically, the money from the project basically went to creating latrines. And you know, when you think of all the things that the Gates Foundation does, all of the development work that happens in places like Africa, latrines are actually one of the most important things that you can do for a community because of the impact that it has on health. So this is me in Ségou. So I went in 2011 as I wasn't the project manager, but I was sort of the manager from the Virginia Friends of Mali side, going over to the project sites to sort of check on them. I had to do translation work for Sister Cities International. You'd think that Sister Cities International would have somebody who spoke French, maybe, or at least one other language, but the person they provided, this gentleman over here, the green shirt next to me in that picture, Dace, he did not speak any other language other than English. And so, even though he was living in West Africa. And so I had to provide translation services, but also really sort of be sort of the sort of like the budget hawk and sort of looking at the management of the project and was it actually going according to plan and what was happening with the project. So I spent about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I spent a month-long time in back in West Africa in 2011, 7 years, I think, or 6 years after I had left. And, but it was an interesting experience going back specifically just about latrines. So we have this latrine project, which now is completed. I don't actually have pictures of the completed project. I tried to find them, but for some reason I really couldn't find them anywhere in my files, but somebody has them. I'm sure Sister Cities International and the Gates Foundation had them. But these are the pictures from when I was there. And so this grant essentially created, we had latrines at a kindergarten, 3 different locations. Latrines at a kindergarten, latrines, and this latrine at the kindergarten, as you can see, these are actually what we call improved latrines. They're a type of latrine that has a venting hole because you don't want the ground to explode because of all the methane. And you also have a system, yes, it happens. It happens, please. You know, if you think, oh, it's just a little, you know, just a little methane gas. No, no, it can explode. It will explode. So venting is actually a really important part of a pit latrine. And having light, because electricity is not readily available, so you're not going to be able to go in at night and just like walk into the latrine and like turn on the light, because that doesn't exist in most other parts of the world. So so you have to have areas where there light from the moonlight could shine through. Yes. Oh, sorry. The moonlight can shine through, and you have the opportunity to be able to see a little bit. You kind of want to make sure that there's no snakes. You want to make sure that you've cleared the area of roaches before you go in. I have lots of horror stories about latrines, so if you ask them, I may tell you the answer. I'm not sure you'll want it. But so one of the projects that we worked on was this latrine at a kindergarten. And you know, you think, well, they didn't have a bathroom at the kindergarten? No, they did not have a bathroom at the kindergarten. Literally, children were just pooping around the corner, out in the open, which is gross. So, and this area right here, which is a trash heap, essentially, around the corner from the kindergarten was where everybody went. Right there. And so that is a huge public health problem. but also it's a sanitation problem for disease. I mean, the number of diseases that are caused by fecal matter getting on hands and then somehow entering into your digestive system there are a lot of diseases, hundreds in fact, that are caused by that particular cycle, and it's totally preventable. Almost all of them are totally preventable with soap and water and access to a pit latrine. The second project we worked on was a women's clinic, women's health clinic, and it was basically a birthing center. We were adding on to the most popular. There was a really awesome OBGYN in Mali and in Segu, and he was so popular that all the women from the other parts of the region were coming to him to have all their babies because he had a high birth survival success rate. And so we wanted to help him out and make sure that there was enough room for all these ladies. So we built a separate clinic that was just for birthing, not with the rest of the health clinic, because obviously women having babies don't need to necessarily be next to people with like other diseases and other things, because it's not really a medical kit, it's not really a health problem to be pregnant, right? So we built a set of latrines for the doctors as well as the nurses and for all of the people coming to the clinic, because pregnant people do have to pee a lot. So we made sure that we had like extra wide rooms and like lots of space and like, you know, big enough holes so you don't have to aim, because let me tell you, sometimes the hole is like this big. Can you imagine trying to like aim in a hole for like this big? Anyway, so sorry to give you the visual. And then our last location, and I think I took out the slide, but is here, and this was the main market in Segu, which is where everybody did all of their grocery shopping. They don't have supermarkets in most of West Africa. You know, they have something in some of the capital cities called hyperbobo, which means like Uber baby is what that translates to in English, but it really is just like a supermarket chain, but they only have like one per capital city. So if you don't live in the capital, and if you don't have money, that's not really accessible to you. So most people go into an open air market, they buy all their food, but the problem is that while they're coming from maybe 20 kilometers away to come into the city to buy their food and buy dishes and buy you know, kettles, and actually, by the way, this is the bathroom kettle, and we'll go into that in a second. But when you go in to buy your items like this, you eat food, and then after you eat food, what happens? You have to go. And so when you have to go, where do people go? Oh, whoops, sorry. Where do you go? A lot of people would walk around to a building. I was telling Judy the other day, it was very popular in my village. My village was a popular, when I lived in Guinea, it was a popular town for our market. So our market went from, you know, our village went from like maybe 2,000 people on a regular day to like 20,000 people on market day. And my house happened to be the end of the market on market day. Now, when I moved to Guinea, when I moved to my village was called Sanu. When I moved to Sanu, people were like, oh, you're at the end of the market, it's so great, you know, you can just walk right outside the door and like everything's right in front of you. And I had the meat was not that far from my house, which you really don't want to know about meat in Africa, don't ever eat it. There's lots of flies involved, you just don't want it. And there's no refrigeration, by the way, so there's that. And then, you know, I had like these little ladies that had like trucker cookies, what we called trucker cookies, which were just like fried dough. And then there was like a whole bunch of people just hung out with like goats and sheep, and they wanted to sell their goats and sheep to other people, right, basically in front of my house. But what that meant is that on any given market day, my front porch, which kind of looked, not like this was very fancy, actually, as things exist, but my front porch, which was essentially, you know, maybe 10 feet long, was filled with like 25 people hanging out because I didn't have a fence, and you know, they're just hanging out in my house or in front of my house. But they would always try to go into, I always wondered, why did they give me a lock for my latrine? And Peace Corps actually in the contract for me to be in my village, they actually had it in the contract that my latrine had to be lockable. And I didn't understand that. I also didn't understand when I applied for the Peace Corps, they ask you a question on the initial questionnaire to get into the Peace Corps. Can you squat for 5 minutes? And I was like, why would you even ask that question? I don't know. So I just said yes. And then you realize, well, that's what you have to do. Like, literally, you're squatting down, there's a very lovely picture on the other side of this latrine here that will demonstrate. I did not put that in my presentation. Although maybe I did, anyway. But you have to squat, and depending on how long you have to go, you have to squat for kind of a long time. And so, they asked, so I realized later, there's a reason that you have to squat for so long, and there's a reason that they make sure that your latrine has to be locked. People would try to bang through the doors, they try to pull off the door to my latrine to go, because otherwise, what are they doing? They go to an open lot, which might be the start of a foundation of a house, which in Africa, houses get built over a long period of time. So you build the foundation, you have enough money, you save up, you build the foundation. Then maybe 3 or 4 years later, you build the next level of bricks up. You may build one wall, and then a few years later, you have enough to build another wall. So it's a process over time for many people. So they'll just go into the foundation that has been laid by somebody. Maybe it's a year old, maybe it's 2 years old, and there's grass in it, grass has grown in the foundation area, and they'll just poop there. Literally, they just go out, around, literally around the corner from my house, there was an open plot for a house that had all the bricks that were yay high, and there was grass about yay high, and that's where everybody from the market went if they didn't have access to a latrine. Needless to say, the grass got really high during the rainy season. So exactly what is a pit latrine? This is exactly what a pit latrine looks like. They have vents at the top. There's usually a little venting pole, which I wouldn't have expected to be made here, and then you might not be able to see it in here. There's the 2 footprints and your hole for the hole. And that's it. Sometimes it's made out of mud bricks, sometimes it's made out of cinder blocks, sometimes it's made with a grass skirt type enclosure, or no enclosure at all. It's about 4.5 feet deep, 4 to 5 meters deep, and it has a concrete slab to cover the top of it so that it can be cleaned on a regular basis. And it's just deep enough to allow for there to be, maybe a family of 6 or 8 or maybe 10 could use it for about maybe 4 years, is how much you kind of expect to be able to use it before you have to sort of let it. There are still some composting latrines, which are actually very useful because you can let it lay fallow. You have to build 2 of them at a time so that one can lay fallow for a year, the other one can be in use. But it can't be but so deep because what we had in my village was the issue is that, so the water table might be here, and then the latrine level might be here. But the problem is, during the rainy season, the water table goes here. So if the water table gets too closely sort of linked to the same table as how low your latrine level is, there was a problem because your actual drinking water, where you built this lovely, what we all paid for last year, these wonderful water pumps, they become contaminated water. And it was more prevalent with people who had wells instead of water pumps, which is why a sealed water pump, what we all purchased last year, was super important. Having those pumps is it's the difference between life and death, because if you have a well that's open to the air, which means stuff from the sky could get in it, and you have stuff from the water and the groundwater table goes up and meets the latrine level, then you're just in trouble altogether, and you have to boil your water or you will not survive. Your kids won't survive. And this is one of the reasons that children under 5 are at a huge risk for not surviving in the developing world. So this is how these sort of systems work. It's super simple. One of these costs about $150, which seems like nothing. I mean, How much does it cost to do a bathroom in an American home? $5,000, $10,000 more dollars, right? For $150, you can have, it's like the best money, you know, it's for the best kind of latrine you can buy on the market, right? So you have your venting hole that has a fly screen on it because you really don't want flies. You're gonna get them, but you just don't want them. You have, that's over the venting pipe, you have sort of an angled roof that has areas right like this for ventilation so that you don't pass out while you're in the latrine because it smells really bad. And having this venting hole and then the venting from here through the hole actually helps to clear out some of the bad smell that you know is there. Then you have a concrete slab and they make sure that it's deep enough so that there's room for you to go for a while, because who wants to have to dig another one of those every, you know, year or so. So they try to make it so that they can last for several years at a time. And of course, there's this little hole, which is what you squat over. Now, oddly enough, the squatting over a hole is actually so much better for you than sitting on a toilet. Like, mechanically speaking for your body, things move a lot easier. I don't know, have any of you ever heard of the squatty potty? Right? The whole design behind the squatty potty is really to put you in the same position that you would be if you were using a pit latrine. It's just that, you know, we don't want to do that. I mean, we don't want to have a pit latrine here. So, worldwide, there's about 2.5 billion people who don't have access to basic sanitation. They have no way of safely disposing of their waste or wastewater. And when I say wastewater, that even means like shower water, like gray water. When I lived in Guinea, my shower disposed into my latrine, which was a problem. Because if you can't, the gray water from your shower filling up your latrine just means that it fills it up faster and you're less likely to be able to like, it's gonna fill it up faster, so you end up having to like put that latrine to rest, or having to have a more unfortunate soul have to dig your latrine out for you, which is a really horrible job. Nobody should ever have to do that. And yet there's a lot of times that it fills up because gray water and wastewater are going into the same place, and so it fills up faster than that 4 or 5 year time frame, and then you have to actually literally have somebody dig it up for you. So improving sanitation is super easy. These $150 latrines, it's really simple, but it's really effective at allowing somebody to have a safe place to go where all of the wastewater goes into one place that, in many cases, if you add a composting function to it, allows it to sort of, I mean, we do this here. We allow our waste to be converted into fertilizer, not for food consumption, thankfully, but it is used for things that are like corn that's made into products and things like that. We allow our waste to be used in that way, and this kind of system allows people in other parts of the world to have that same kind of efficiency. There's a cheap way of making sure that people have access to a more sanitized life, and including soap and water means that you want to eliminate the possibility of any sort of diseases that go through fecal matter, but you highly reduce people's access to sort of passing those germs around. And honestly, in Africa, virtually no wastewater receives treatment. So other than sort of either composting function or laying fallow of a latrine, there's no other sanitizing. The capital city of Guinea, Conakry, my parents can attest to this, there was zero treatment of water for a city that had as many people as like probably the Richmond region, I would say. So if you can imagine, the sewers literally just have like, you know, raw sewage just, you know, going right to the ocean. If we were at Virginia Beach, literally it would just be like little pipeline out in between trenches between people's homes that go right into the ocean. And then that's where everybody went to fish for all their fish. It's just like a really bad situation. So there's no treatment of wastewater in Africa, which is a real problem. So using latrines, having latrines available, it's harder for urban areas like the capital city, but for any other area, it's an easy fix that allows people to save lives.
It's not listening to me, I'm sorry. Oh.
So, when you think about it, the impact that we can have is really great because honestly, how many of us waste $150 in art like during a year? Just 1 year, right? I mean, I'm not talking about like every day. Clearly, we're not like throwing money away. But when you think about $150, you're able to save probably a whole family, not just one person, not just, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there. $150. I mean, I probably, in general, probably waste that in a year on probably ridiculous things like, you know, buying gum or whatever. It all adds up. But 1 billion people defecate in public in the world. And by building one latrine, we're able to actually save probably the entire family's worth of people. Now in Africa, that means a lot of people, right? So if you're living in Africa, you've got, you know, a dad and he may have like 3 wives, right? Every wife has like 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7. My nene in Africa had like 9 kids. So, and she was the 3rd wife. So, you know, you're saving a lot of people when you think about saving a family by offering them the opportunity to have a latrine. When you talk about latrines for a village or latrines for a marketplace, you're actually saving more and more lives. And the ones that we were building in Mali actually had hand washing stations, which is super important. Super important. We actually were able to hook up the best equivalent to municipal water to their systems. It's not really, that's not the right term for it, but we were able to actually put hand washing stations there. So for people who are Muslim, hand washing is actually really important. You have to wash your head, your hands, and your feet before prayer, and they have to pray 5 times a day. So essentially that's actually really helpful for living in places like Africa, because the more you wash your hands, the more likely you are to not get sick. I don't know if that was the reason behind the praying 5 times a day in the beginning, but it's a really helpful thing for many people in West Africa and other parts of the world. The problem is a lot of them don't necessarily have access to soap. And the reason that soap is really important, what do you think people who are using latrine use for toilet paper? You're right. You use your left hand. So the right hand is for handshaking and eating, because there's a lot of eating with your hands, which is a little hard for rice. I will say it's a technique that has to be learned. But your left hand is always the bathroom hand. Hence, I think for in history, probably why people with left hands, who are left-handed, maybe always seen with suspicion. But the left hand is always the bathroom. The left hand is always the bathroom hand. You do not shake hands with your left hand. You do not do things for people with your left hand. Left hand is the dirty hand. The right hand is the hand for eating and shaking hands. So, and breaking bread, et cetera, et cetera. So, for many people, this literally is what you use to go to the bathroom. It's a plastic this is a tiny version. If you had a family, this is a single person's version of a kettle, because clearly I've been single a long time. But it would maybe be triple this size if you had a family. It's a plastic tea kettle. It costs about $1 in American money to buy, which is actually a lot of money. It's not cheap to buy a plastic kettle, but or maybe it's 50 cents. But it's one of these things that this, along with a bar of soap and a pit latrine, can do wonders. When you think about soap being like, we have antibacterial soap, and we have soaps that do all these like amazing, wonderful things. If you just have a bar of lye soap that's made with like, nothing kind of ingredients, just some fat and some, lye, that's totally fine. It will clean away everything that you need to get rid of germs and all these other things. But, I think when we think about our impact and the things that we're able to do in the world, we have the ability to save, look at this. I mean, the estimated cause of 842,000 deaths, disease-related deaths from diarrhea. Diarrhea is a huge killer. And all of those things that are diarrheal deaths can be prevented simply by having a pit latrine and washing your hands with soap and water. And anything that we can do to participate in this effort is something that we can feel proud of, even though it's poop. And talking about poop is not like everybody's favorite thing to do, and it's not like sexy. It's not sort of what we think of as like, oh yeah, my church is like buying latrines for everybody. That's not really, It sounds like really cool to say, oh, we bought like water systems for people. We've like bought, nets for malaria, which are all awesome, and obviously we did an awesome job doing that, and we exceeded our goals every time to do that. But when we think about how we can save lots of lives and have a true impact and save lives into the future, things like that are not sexy, like pit latrines, are one of the best ways that we can do that. And I hope that as we move through Lent, we'll all feel compelled and honored to help in this kind of effort and give as much as we can to make sure that as many of these $150 latrines can make their way to actually saving people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We had this presentation because guess what we're going to do during Lent? Yes.
What's the goal? I know you got a goal.
I do have a goal. We're going to try to raise enough for 10 latrines, which will be $1,500. Okay? And I think it's doable. We did a wonderful job with our soup right now. How many pounds was it?
645 pounds.
645 pounds of soup. Wasn't that wonderful? So, thank you.
651 cans.
651 cans. Okay. Can of soup is a pound.
600
Close. Our original goal was 500, and you all just were great with that, so we just said, how about 600? And we went over that. So it's really wonderful. So they actually, in the Good Gifts catalog from the ELCA, they say it's a Lutheran long drop latrine. They name it Lutheran. So we have named our latrine Lutheran, and it will be out in the narthex for all of Lent. Please don't use it. But go around, because there's a lot that we don't really know about the Lutherans and all of our world help that we do. And so all around the entire latrine, we have different things, and I think you'll really enjoy it, and we probably will put a few more items. And actually, you can take a look at that and just think, how lucky are we? And how blessed are we? So this is what we're doing, and it really is it something with hunger? Because we are doing the 40 days of hunger, and yes, if you don't have good sanitation, you cannot have good food, you can be sick, and so it really starts with this. So thank you all for coming. It was really great. If you could help by just kind of busting your own place. And thank you very much for coming tonight.